instruction. Many of us have been trained to think that a sage on the stage is a wrong way of teaching, that teaching is not about imparting knowledge to students, but is rather about creating conditions where pupils discover and construct knowledge for themselves. However, this notion has been challenged recently by cognitive psychologists and by educationalists, and here's 4 reasons why. The first is because direct instruction works. In his huge study of educational interventions, John Hattie found that direct instruction had an effect size of 0.6. This is very high and much higher than other predictors such as socioeconomic status or working memory strength. By contrast, many discovery and inquiry-based interventions had effect sizes below 0.4. Also, many high-performing East Asian nations that perform very well in the PISA rankings have a much higher ratio of teacher to pupil talk than schools in the UK, and this is reflected in their results. Also, it's necessary. We've built up a huge amount of knowledge over the millennia, and it's unreasonable to think that pupils can recreate this themselves if they're just given the pieces of the jigsaw. It's taken many geniuses over many hundreds of years to put the pieces together, and so there's a lot that needs to be taught explicitly. Also, there's a false dichotomy between active and passive learning here. We remember what we think about, and so when pupils are active, we have to ask, what are they actively thinking about? If there's lots of activity and talking and moving around, they may be very active physically, but they may not be active in thinking about what you want them to think about. Whereas a class sitting listening to a teacher might look boring, but if they are engaged in what they are saying and being asked questions and invested in what's going on, then that activity will result in much greater learning. And finally, discovery models of learning disproportionately affect those who are already ahead. Those who've got a background in which they already have the social skills to work in a group, that have the self-control to focus on a task and not get distracted, are the ones that do well, and they are generally the ones already ahead. And you know this yourselves from the last time you set a discovery-based task in your classroom. Who are the ones that actually got the answer you were looking for, and who are the ones that just chat and copy? What about problem solving, you might say? Well, problem solving is a crucial skill, but it's a skill that comes after that vital knowledge acquisition stage. And so when you're starting a new topic, you need a period of direct instruction to get that foundational knowledge in place before moving on to problem solving. So what exactly is direct instruction? Here are some of the things John Hattie summarises as 7 important steps. Knowing what the class are learning is essential before the teacher begins the lesson. Knowing what performance is expected of them, in other words, the success criteria, and holding pupils accountable to that. The pupils need to be invested in the lesson, they need to be hooked into what's going on. There needs to be input and modelling from the teacher, as well as lots of checking for understanding from the class. There has to be some guided practice, including feedback on how the pupils are doing. There has to be a closure to the lesson and summarising what has been done during the lesson, what learning has been achieved. And finally, some independent practice needs to be put in place. If you're interested in finding out more, I highly recommend this book by Daisy Christodoulou. It will probably challenge most of the things that you learnt in teacher training and thought were self-evident truths about teaching.